Welcome to The Explainer. If you are a focused learner looking to totally demystify back-end web development, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're diving deep into Django, the ultimate toolkit for developers who want to build powerful, dynamic web applications efficiently. We're going to bypass all the noise and focus squarely on the core architecture and operations that make Django such an absolute industry favorite. We've got a great roadmap lined up for you. We'll start with a welcome to Django web development, unpack the MVT architecture, and set up your foundation. Then, we'll master create and read, move on to mastering update and delete, and wrap things up with some crucial security and power features. Let's get building. All right, Section 1, welcome to Django web development. Let's just dive right in. Django is built on this fantastic philosophy of abstracting away all those tedious, repetitive parts of building web apps. It lets you write clean Python code to handle everything from URL routing to database management, keeping you focused on what actually makes your application unique instead of constantly reinventing the wheel. Because at the heart of almost any dynamic app is data management, and that really boils down to CRUD, C-R-U-D. That stands for Create, Read, Update, and Delete. Whether you're making a student registry to track enrollments or a slick app for your favorite recipes, empowering users to do those four things is the ultimate goal. Those four pillars are the absolute focus of our toolkit today. Moving on to Section 2, unpacking the MVT architecture. Before we swing our hammers and actually start writing code for those CRUD operations, we've got to understand Django's core blueprints, right? You literally can't build a sturdy house without knowing its structural supports. Think about what happens when a user interacts with your app. It triggers this perfectly mapped relay race called the request-response cycle. A web request comes in, hits the URL routing to figure out where to go, triggers a view to process the logic, pulls data from the model in the database, and finally returns a visual response right back to the user. And that entire relay race is governed by what Django calls the MVT architecture. That's model, view, and template. The model manages your data, the view handles the control flow and logic, and the template takes care of what the user actually sees. This setup champions something called loose coupling, which basically means you can tweak one piece without breaking the whole shebang. It keeps your app incredibly modular and super easy to maintain. To really make this theoretical architecture click, just think of your Django app like a restaurant. The model? That's your kitchen and pantry where the raw ingredients, the data, live. The template is the dining room. It's the plating, exactly what the customer experiences. And the view? That's your waiter. It takes requests from the dining room, runs back to the kitchen to fetch the right order, and delivers the final product back to the table. Makes perfect sense, right? Okay, Section 3, setting up your foundation. With that blueprint in our heads, it's time to roll up our sleeves and lay down the actual groundwork for our project using the command line. Getting your foundation laid takes just 3 quick steps in the terminal. First, you run Django admin start project to create the main container. Second, you go inside that and run python manage.py start app to build a specific modular app like our recipe manager. And third, and guys, this is absolutely crucial, you have to register that new app by adding it to the installed apps list in your settings file. If you skip step 3, Django literally won't even know your app exists. Now, what's super cool is how Django handles database creation. In your models file, you just define simple Python classes. You use things like a char field for a name, a text field for an about section, or a date field. Then Django's object relational mapping, or ORM, magically translates those Python definitions into real database tables behind the scenes. You don't have to write a single line of raw SQL. It is a real game changer. But before we jump into writing the views for our CRUD operations, let's anchor ourselves in standard web mechanics. You've got to map those CRUD goals to their underlying HTTP protocols. Reading data? That uses a simple GET request. But anytime you want to create, update, or delete, you're actively changing the server state, which typically requires a secure POST request. All right, Section 4, mastering create and read. Our foundation is set, so let's tackle getting data into our system and pulling it back out to display. To build this out properly, we have to contrast GET and POST requests. If someone just navigates to a URL to browse a list of students or recipes, that's a GET request. They're just fetching the page. But if they fill out a form to add a brand new entry and hit submit, that fires off a POST request containing all that new data, actively modifying the database. Your view logic has to check which type of request is actually happening. So, let's look at step 1, create. When your system detects a post request, you capture the incoming form data, say a student's name and email. Then, using that handy Django ORM we talked about, you instantiate a new model object with the data and just call .save. Boom! A brand new record is written securely to your database. Once we actually have data, we move to step 2, read. To display our records, we write a view that fetches everything from the database using .objects.all. We pass that fetched data as a dictionary into our HTML template, and over in the HTML, we use Django's templating language, specifically a neat little for loop and double curly braces, to dynamically unpack and display every single record right there on the user's screen. Moving right along to section 5, mastering, update, and delete. We're halfway there. We can add records and view them, but data doesn't stay static forever, right? We need to be able to change it. Step 3 is the update phase. What makes updating kind of fascinating is that it elegantly combines what we've already done. First, it uses the fetching logic of a read to load existing data into a form. Then, when the user modifies things and hits submit, it uses the saving logic of a create to overwrite that exact record. The big question here is accuracy. How does Django know exactly which record to update without accidentally overwriting your whole database? Well, the secret is the primary key, or PK. When creating the URL route for an update, you pass that PK right in the URL, like /update/for/. Your view catches that exact ID, grabs that one specific record, populates the form, and ensures only that specific item gets altered. And that brings us to step 4, delete. Honestly, this is probably the most straightforward operation of the whole bunch. Just like with updating, you pass the primary key in the URL, so your view knows exactly which object to target. You fetch the object, and then you just call the .delete method on it. Simple as that. The record is completely wiped from the database. Finally, section 6, security and power features. We've built out all 4 pillars of CRUD, which is amazing, but no Master Builder's Toolkit is really complete without talking about safety. Let's seamlessly pivot to a really crucial built-in security feature. Look, if you've ever built an HTML form in Django, hit submit, and immediately slammed into a dreaded 403 forbidden error, you are not alone. It is a total rite of passage for developers. Django does this on purpose to block unverified post requests and stop malicious activity, like cross-site request forgery. To fix it, you just drop a simple CSRF_token tag inside your HTML form. It generates a hidden security token telling Django, hey, this request is legitimately coming from our site. And there you have it. You've navigated the MVT architecture, set up your foundation, mastered the logic behind creating, reading, updating, and deleting records, and even secured your forms. You officially have the Master Builder's Toolkit for Django. The concepts are clear, the framework is incredibly powerful, so the only question left for you is, what dynamic application are you going to build next?